stand and face the flag while we honor America. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kathy will now call the roll.
Councilmember Helfrich?
Here.
Councilmember Holmstrom?
Here.
Councilmember Waring?
Here.
Councilmember Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember Storm?
Here.
Councilmember Cravlet?
Here.
Mayor Allen?
Yes, thank you, Kathy. First of all, I just wanted to welcome everyone for being here, our citizens and our guests from out of town. We appreciate you for being part of this meeting. And you are an important part of our decision-making process. I also wanted to point out that we do have several opportunities for you to participate. In our action items, if you'd like to address the council, you can sign up here on this clipboard. Looks like a number of you have already. And then later, we'll have a spot if you wanted to talk about a non-agenda item. You could sign up for that. Since I failed to mention it at the last meeting, I'll make sure I mention it now. Our council rules indicate a 5-minute time period if you'd like to speak. So Kathy typically has a timer going, and if the timer goes off, that's the signal that your time's up. So we ask you to respect that part of our council rules. Is there anyone that would like to sign up that hasn't already? This is to sign up to address the council. So Virginia, you wrote down general comment. Is that going to be a non-agenda item or an agenda item? Non-agenda. Okay. And Dave, you're going to be non-agenda item. Right, we'll move now to our next item on the agenda, which is additions or amendments to the agenda. Paul, you're the custodian of our agenda, so I understand you have a couple of items to suggest for us.
Yes, Your Honor. Mayor and members of the council, I'd like to recommend that item 5F, the contract and scope of work for the electric rate study be added under action items. Item 5G, a recommendation dealing with a contract for the charging station for electric vehicles be added, and item 5H, which is a recommendation dealing with fire volunteers and adding 6 probationary volunteers be added to the agenda.
Okay. So Paul, have these items been part of a report and presentation prior to this meeting?
Yeah, the electric rate study has been something that's been on your agenda in discussions since you authorized us to go to RFQ. This is now the culmination of that process, which is the contract and the scope of work. The charging station issue has been discussed previously with you, and the volunteers for the fire service have not.
Okay, so we've heard those recommendations. If council members have any other suggestions or would like to comment on those 3 additions to the agenda, now would be the time to suggest any changes. And seeing none, we will add item 5F, approval of electric rate study contract and scope of work. Item 5G, a lease agreement for an electric car charging station, and item 5H, a recommendation about fire department volunteers. So please make a note of that on your agendas. Okay. We'll move now to the next item on the agenda, which is the adoption of our consent agenda. And that includes approval of the minutes of the June 18th council meeting, approval of the minutes of the June 25 council meeting, ratification of the bills in the amount of $110,386.76, an authorization to renew annual property and liability insurance, and authorization to renew annual workers' compensation insurance. Next step is for a motion and a second from the council to approve the consent agenda. Brad?
Approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made by Brad, second by Mark. Any discussion, comment, or question? Okay. Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of adoption of the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, next item on our agenda is public hearings. We do not have any scheduled for this evening. We do plan to have a public hearing scheduled at our next meeting regarding the vacation of Hassel Street, or section of Hassel Street. But tonight we don't have any, so we'll move now to action items. First action item is the authorization to hire an individual for Deputy Recorder Administrative aid.
I'll make a motion to,
Let's get a staff report first. I apologize for that.
you want to do it that way?
Yeah, we'll follow staff report, public comments, and then motion. Paul, is Kathy going to be
Kathy
getting
will
this?
get that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kathy?
Mayor and council, on 14th of May, council authorized hiring a part-time deputy recorder administrative aide. We advertised for that position, received 13 applicants, and we tested and interviewed 7. And we would recommend that council approve the hiring of Megan Webb as the part-time deputy recorder administrative aide.
Thank you, Kathy. I do not have anyone signed up to comment from the audience about that, so we'll move now to council motion
Okay,
and second.
I'll make a motion to hire Megan Webb as a part-time city recorder.
Second.
Okay, we've had a motion by Brad and a second by Gail. Is there any council comment, question, or discussion? Yes.
On the
Tom?
agenda, we had a different name on there
On the staff report,
then.
Amanda Brooks accepted the job, and then she called on Friday and said, due to unforeseen circumstances, she could not. So we went with the next on the
And that was sent to us in an email and also put on our desks tonight, so thank you for that. Thank you. Other questions, comments, or discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Abstain. The reason why I'm abstaining.
Opposed?
Sorry,
Abstentions?
abstain.
Okay,
And,
motion carries. Would you like to say why?
yeah, the reason why I'm abstaining is Megan's a friend of the family, and I didn't want to give the look or her parents that there's any favoritism involved in this process. So to be open and transparent, that's where it's at.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Right, we'll move now to item 5B, approving the law enforcement services agreement with Hood River County. Paul, will you be doing the staff report?
Yes, I will.
This one, take it away.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, you have before you the proposed contract for law enforcement services between the city and Hood River County Sheriff. This is for a dollar amount of $87,133, and it provides you with an additional 24 hours of service over and above what you would normally receive from your tax dollars. Attached to the Proposed contract is the May 2012 report from the county sheriff. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have. Oh, by the way, this is an approved dollar amount in the budget.
Okay.
So at 87,133 is in the approved budget.
Okay, thank you. Tiffany, you asked to speak to the council on this?
Again, I have take issue with the fact that the city of Cascade Locks is going to cover the highway within the city borders, the city, inside the city limits as part of those 24 hours. The police department would have to respond to those whether or not we had a contract. Therefore, I do not feel like that should be part of the 24 hours that we pay for extra from our tax dollars. In your contract, it states the contract provides for a sheriff deputy to spend at least 24 hours per week performing law enforcement patrols within the city, excluding I-84, not within the city limits of Cascade Locks. And when they were here last year and asked the question, that included them responding to accidents or whatever on I-84 within the city limits. And to me, that is not what I see this tax money going towards. The tax money I see is it going towards issues and needs within the city limits of Cascade Locks that are not on I-84, which they would naturally respond to if we didn't have this contract. So I would ask that you would consider doing something about that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next step is for council motion second to approve this contract.
I'll move we approve the contract for services with Bitterroot County Sheriff.
Okay, the motion's been made by Randy Holmstrom. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Mark has seconded. We'll move now to council question, comment, and discussion. Don?
Yeah, did we want to address Tiffany's concerns on this all in the motion, or?
Well,
Yeah.
but are you asking?
Well, yeah.
Just a general question for
Yeah,
council?
yeah, just a general question for council, did you want to? Yeah,
So I do.
okay, sure. There you go.
Is that-
That's
so
the question I
okay.
had. Did
Yeah.
anybody-
Yeah,
I
I was.
didn't want to let it go without asking the question.
Right, thank you, Tom. Other questions, comment, or discussion on this?
Is there any, has there been any breakdown as far as the I-84 inside city limit stats?
None that I have seen. The only information that we ever see is the monthly report that comes from the sheriff's department.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think regarding that, we should get a point of clarification. I mean, I can understand if the deputy happens to be in town here and there's an accident and he's the closest, he should respond, but I don't think that should be charged against our time. So I think there's two issues, you know, should he respond? Well, probably if he's the closest, but not count against our contract.
Yeah, and I think it was 2 or 3 years ago that this was inserted into the contract, as I recall. And the issue was, the reason why this particular clause was inserted was we wanted to clarify that the 24 hours doesn't start when the deputy leaves Hood River, Parkdale, or Hood. It starts when he enters the city limits. So if I-84 is part of the city limits, that part would be part of the 24 hours. So I think that's why this particular section was inserted. That's just what I recall.
Okay.
So, and that it was just an attempt to say, you know, we don't want to get shortchanged 3-4 hours a week in travel time.
We're not covering West County, it's city limits.
Right.
So what we
Tom?
lose in potential accident or something here within our city limits, we gain in not being charged to travel back and forth. Is that what they're looking at there?
I suppose you could look at it like that, yeah. Jeff?
I think if we have an accident within our city limits and a deputy's able to respond to that accident while within our 24 hours of coverage, that's acceptable, but it shouldn't be charged against us like you talked about the travel time, which I think is a very smart way to have that in that language, where we're not charged for when they go in service in Parkdale, that travel time to I-84, but it would be only natural that they would respond and be a part of that, and try to manage the sheriff's administrative ability to service calls for service at our level, I don't think is right. I mean, if somebody needs help or assistance somewhere on the freeway, it's in our boundaries, and have deputies in town, I think that there's an expectation that they respond for that.
Just like they might respond if there's, you know, something at Starvation Creek and they happen to be on patrol here in Cascade Locks and they're the closest person. You know, they might respond outside the city limits too, even if their designated time is here.
Paul, do you know how they track their time? Is it through the CAD when they go in service into Cascade Locks?
I do not know specifically how they do.
I was just curious how they track the time, that 24 hours that's allotted for the contract, how that's, if it's just they're driving through the city limits and they can say they're in service for that 15 minutes and then drive out to go and turn around and go back out. That doesn't really, we're not getting any value for that extra money, and I don't think that's appropriate. But if they're actually working in the city, problem solving, I think that's appropriate for them to respond.
Tom?
So I guess that's the question. We've made a motion on this contract, and that isn't in the contract, but it sounds like people are talking about we should have some wording in this contract that says if the guy's here that we may not get charged for the time he goes out on the freeway, or if he leaves Cascade Locks to go outside, or even in. Do we want that? So that's, I guess, the question, because right now we've got a motion on the floor just to take the contract as is,
yeah,
which
right.
is they're going to charge you to be out on the freeway here within the city limits. So I guess are we interested in changing the motion to include that, take that contract back to them?
So that goes, I mean, are you suggesting any specific language being changed, or?
Well, just listening to, Big Dale mentioned something, Jeff mentioned something, I think in both cases, they understand that if the deputy's here, the deputy's gonna go respond. I think we all understand that. We just, it sounds like that, if the deputy does respond, then we don't get charged, for them responding to that. Right now, we're gonna be charged. So the way the contract is now, we're gonna be charged for them to respond.
Let me see if I can suggest something that I think is what you're trying to get to. Eliminate the parenthetical not within the city limits of Cascade Locks. It's on the next page. Down there on 2B. So what we could potentially do is keep that same first sentence, but remove the parenthetical at the end. So that it would say 24 hours per week performing law enforcement patrols within the city, excluding I-84.
Okay,
Isn't that what you're trying to get?
Yeah, right now they are, I mean, Jeff was talking about just going Starvation Creek, this covers that. It is excluding I-84, not within the city limits. I think we're one part of the question is, do we exclude I-84 in general?
But it does say excluding I-84.
Right, it says that excluding I-84, not within the city limits. So if they go to Starvation Creek, they're not gonna charge us for that, but they are gonna charge us for anything on I-84 within the city limits.
Gail?
Do we have any idea how often that occurs? I mean, how big of an issue is
I
it?
don't know, I can't imagine, it's a pretty small, short area.
I mean,
Jeff?
Gail, were you done?
yeah.
Well, it says in our contract to spend at least 24 hours per week performing law enforcement patrols. So if we look at May's breakdown, the assigned deputy has worked 126.5 hours within the city of Cascade locks, and then additional hours worked from other deputies is another 52.5 hours. They've met the contract at the additional. So I don't know how much they're actually working, but they're meeting the requirements of the 24 hours is what I'm seeing by what they have on the monthly stat report.
Okay, so at the risk of moving on, I have a question. Paul, I wish that the past when we've had these contracts before, we've had either the sheriff himself or his, what is it called, Jeff, assistant sheriff?
Under sheriff.
Okay. Here to answer questions and explain. And so I was hoping that would happen tonight, but they're probably busy. My question, and we've talked about this almost every time this has come to us since I've been on council. My question is, what's the difference between what we have on our May and every monthly report, calls for service, priority, non-priority, officer-initiated, citations, total crimes, and things like that, and law enforcement patrols? See, what I'm trying to get at here is, if we're paying for 24 hours per week for law enforcement patrols, then that's 24 hours per week that we expect the city to be patrolled and have a sheriff presence here. Okay, but is there a difference between those patrols and someone calls the sheriff and says, I've got somebody trying to break into my car, can you come down? So is that a patrol? That's my question. And I don't know, I don't expect you to have the answer, but it seems to me that, I mean, I would like that clarified. I think it really goes to this broader discussion that we're having about whether it's about I-84 or, okay, is it a patrol when there's a deputy for 3/5 of his time is scheduled to be here? Or is it just a patrol when there happens to be a call that a sheriff car shows up at town? And I for one would like to have that question answered before I vote on this. Tom, and then Gail?
Looking at the report, and I know the discussion we've had with the sheriff.
Yes.
Obviously that they do give us more than what we have. So I think that they probably do cover anything extra that would go out on the freeway. It's like I said, we're asking for just under 100 hours a month. That's what they're paying for, $100 out. And as it says here, Harvey gave us 150 hours plus there were 50, or he gave 126 hours plus there were 50 from other people. So we're getting close to 200 hours and paying for 100. So we're probably well within whatever is going to happen out here within our city limits anyway. I'm acceptable of the motion as it is.
Gail?
I feel the same way. We don't have a number on how frequent it is, but for the short distance, I can't imagine it's too often.
Yeah.
And if it happens once a year, I mean, it's just too difficult to manage around, I think, And given the reports, I feel we are getting our money's worth, given the scope of the contract and the money that's being spent.
Yeah. Brad?
Might be on my imagination, but there seems to be some contradicting language within this contract. On the one hand, it says that they will spend at least 24 hours per week, but then item C, it says additional time or coverage requested by the city in excess of minimum hours, as outlined, will be subject to negotiate to additional charges and negotiated between the parties. So that kind of seems, if they're saying there'll be at least 24 hours a week, that means likely more than 24 hours a week, but if they exceed the minimum hours, then they could bill us extra for it. So that seems kind of, seems like kind of a snafu in the language there.
I think that was put in for special events.
Right, and I can address that, and you might remember this, Brad, too, but it was, at one point, they asked for a larger increase than we were prepared to offer, and so that was negotiated back down with the stipulation that this line item be added in, and I mean, I wish we had Mary Ann here, but we don't, but I don't believe they've ever charged us extra. They've always provided special event services without adding that in, but we certainly could ask to have the motion amended to remove that.
But I mean, that's additional time as requested, so that would be outside of like a emergency call or a standard patrol.
Right.
And then if you flip over to the back page, item 7A, it contradicts it a second time, Brad, by saying, the city may occasionally request the assignment of a deputy for a specific time or event in excess of the maximum hour. So long as sufficient personnel is available. So we have a triple contradiction. So we're back to the original.
Okay, so we're back to it. Okay, good deal.
Further comment, question, or discussion?
Mayor, if I could, if there's significant concern, you may either want to postpone action and have the meeting with the sheriff, or approve the contract, and then we can have the sheriff come in and you can have that discussion and clarification.
Okay. Seeing no further comment, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of approving the contract with the sheriff, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair opposes. And abstentions. Motion carries.
Would you like to have the discussion with the sheriff at one of your future meetings?
Yeah.
Okay, is there a consensus from the council to have a discussion with the sheriff?
Yes.
Jeff?
Well, the sheriff that we currently have is no longer be in office, and so having that discussion with him, I think, is a moot point. It would be more to talk with the city administrator and the two candidates that are currently running right now, and whoever the winner of that is declared to probably be the one to have that discussion with.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's just go through the consensus then, and I'll continue.
I agree with whoever the new sheriff is, and if you guys want to do it in January or whatever, that's okay with me too.
Brad?
Likewise.
Yeah?
Well, I just didn't hear from the current sheriff to get a position statement. And for those conditions that are in our favor, I'd want to make sure that it got carried forward with the new sheriff. And I think the ones that are being elected are going to tell us what we want to hear.
Well, maybe we should interview both of them, and the one that gives us the best answer, we know which way to throw our votes.
And just to clarify that point too, though, the current sheriff will be in office for half of this fiscal year, half of this contract. Mark?
Yeah, approve it and then, talk to somebody in the department. Jerry Brown, he helped us a lot on the investigation on the robbery, and I think that he would be, a lot of information too. And I don't think he's running his position isn't.
He's at will.
Is it will? Okay.
He's the under.
Yeah, under, okay.
Yeah, I'm willing to do it now and wait for the next year, so it's up to them, I wanna wait till January or the next one.
You do want to wait?
Yeah. No, but I wanna pass the contract, I'm good, we've
We've already passed it.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
So the question
I just
is-
wait for the next sheriff and talk to them about it.
Okay. So, I don't see a consensus to have either way. We've got three people that say, let's have a meeting with the two candidates. We got an either way, and a just Wampler,
Approve it.
and then a Jerry Brown.
Yeah.
So, no consensus on whether or not we bring the sheriff into a meeting, so we'll bring that, you and I will discuss that,
Okay.
whether we're gonna do that. Okay. Next item on our agenda is approval of resolution 1214 for a special city allotment grant from ODOT. Paul, I understand you'll be doing the staff report on this?
Correct, Mayor. Mayor, members of City Council, you have before you a request to authorize staff to apply for a special grant from the state of Oregon for Regulator Street. This is something that was in the current approved budget as $50,000. There's a $5,000 match from the city. The electric department plans to install conduits under the street to help avoid the need for future street cuts, and Public Works will install a new 2-inch water line and adjust or replace a storm drain catch basin to prevent future cuts to the pavement also. So we're asking for authorization to apply for the grant and adopting a resolution 1244 and authorizing the mayor to sign.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Tiffany, you asked to speak to us on this?
One time this was going to be at the other end of town, when did that change? Last I heard it was gonna be down at the Best Western or in that area. Do we know what changed?
What changed?
The location.
You're a different, this is a different item.
They're on C.
This is the paving of Regulator Street.
Oh, okay, sorry, right, wrong thing, okay. The thing I have with, the issue that I have with this is that, on page 2 of your resolution 1244, under number 5, it states that the city of Cascade Locks is hereby offered to the Transportation Commission and does hereby pledge complete cooperation and assistance to the end that said city may share and participate in the use and benefit of said special fund and appropriation, and therefore does designate Lance Masters, mayor, or his designee as the official representative of the city for all negotiations resulting from this request. I take issue with that because the mayor has no spending limit. How is he restrained in making any decisions that could be very costly for the city? The charter states that, except as this charter provides otherwise, all powers of the city shall be vested in the council. This, we've had ODOT dealings in the past that have gotten significantly different than what they were originally, and the negotiations should be done by the council as a whole, not one mayor, in particular. That's my issue.
Okay, the next step is for council motion and second. Mark?
Make motion, approve resolution 1244 and authorizing the city to apply for a grant in the amount of $50,000 for the repair and repaving of Regulator Street and authorizing the mayor to sign the application.
Okay, there's been a motion, is there a second? Second. Well, which one do you want? Okay, we'll give it to Randy. Okay, moving on, next step is for council comment, question, or discussion. Philip?
Yeah, I'm also uncomfortable with 5. I believe that, we hired Paul as administrator to do these type of things. That's what they're trained to do, that's what their experience is. I don't see your experience as this, and I've already seen in the past where we've got given people with a lack of experience positioned to handle money for us, and it's gone awry. So for me, I'm not comfortable with that. It seems to me that Paul should be in charge of it, all appropriations should be taken care of. If Paul brings that to the council, and if he has any issues, he works with the council with it. But I don't think it should be in the hands of somebody who doesn't have this experience of working the streets or working with these kind of monies to be negotiated. I think we're just gonna get ourselves in trouble, financial trouble again, potentially.
So, just to respond to that, I mean, it was mentioned by Tiffany that, I don't have any spending limits, but I guess my counter to that would be that I also don't have any spending authority, so I couldn't negotiate anything without bringing it back to the council, whereas Paul could negotiate, and if it's within his spending limit, could approve it. But if I was in charge of the negotiations, nothing would be agreed to until it was approved by the council, which really does kind of bring us back to what the charter says, is that all the powers are vested in the council. So, I mean, I don't think it's a negotiation. I mean, if you look at the actual language in that resolution, I don't think it authorizes me to spend anything. And certainly there's no authority to, I mean, the charter doesn't grant any authority to, for me to ever, or for any mayor to make any spending decisions like that, so. I mean, that's just the way I look at it. You'd actually have more control as a council over it with the existing resolution, but having said that, I don't have any idea how my name got inserted in there.
So, yeah, I guess, so what's your
I
background?
didn't write it.
Huh?
I didn't write the resolution.
Well, I guess, is it my turn?
Go back to Tom, then we'll get to you.
Well, again, what background do you have in building a city street or all the monies and appropriation for the city street or negotiating these kind of things? And Paul's been, that's what he's done, he's trained with these things, these are things he's been doing. It seems to me Paul does that, then he brings it, then he brings it to us, and he's the one trained to do this.
Sure. So I've never built a street.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
I guess that was gonna be my, why is it your name instead of Paul's?
Who wrote it?
Kathy's got the answer.
Oh,
Mr. Mayor and Council, this is a template that came from the state, from ODOT. It's their template that they want us to fill in the blanks and use.
Didn't it say the mayor or his agents?
Or
Designate.
Designate.
Huh?
Or
Or
his
designate,
designate.
so, well,
So if I said Paul, take care
so
of it.
Paul is one of those, so, it pretty much says that, that's why they wrote the template that way, so
That's right.
if you make the mayor as the head, then pretty much it covers the rest of it.
Any other questions, comments, or discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm kind of close.
Okay. Abstentions, I will abstain. Motion carries.
So that's 4, 2, and 1.
That's right. Next item on our agenda is the initiation of the referral process for ordinance 416, creating a fire and EMS department fee on property served by the City of Cascade Locks utility to assist covering costs associated with providing fire and EMS services to residents and businesses served, repealing ordinance 374. Paul, I understand you'll be given the staff
correct.
on this.
Mayor and members of council, this is the ordinance that would establish the electric meter base for charging this fee against, for EMS services, as opposed to the current practice of water meters and putting that on the ballot.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Kate?
Okay, I'm of the knowledge, and I could be wrong, I've been before and this town never fails to surprise me, that we serve an awful lot more electrical customers than we have within our city limits. Also, digital utilities is something we want to clear the record at this point, thank you. These people don't have a right to vote on anything. They're not covered by our city limits. I'd like to know if they're included, and if so, how are they represented in this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Next step would be for a council motion and second. Paul?
Mayor, before you do that, I have a email from Cody Steelman that I'd like to have entered into the record for this meeting.
Okay, we'll move now to council motion and second. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve, refer ordinance 416 to the voters on the November 2012 general election ballot.
Second.
Motion's been made by Jeff and was seconded by Brad. Okay. Move now to council comment, question, or discussion. Tom?
Well, the one Cody said he wanted, it says on there, please read this into the record. Were we gonna read that in the record? Or
You can do that.
No, read it.
You want me to read it? This could be a while.
Well, this council wanted, the issue is this council wanted to have the statement read. I want to
Can we
make
get a
sure that it was
consensus
in the
on whether it
record.
should be read?
So, Gail, we can, I just want to let Tom finish his comment. Are you done, Tom?
Well, I guess, well, as far as consensus going, really consistent. Cody has sent this because.
What did you say?
Apparently Cody has sent this because he can't hear it, so
Okay.
he doesn't have a chance to come up to the mic and say it apparently, so he'd like to have it read in. That's I guess that's what that's.
Gail, you're asking for a council consensus on that?
Well, if somebody intends to read it, I'd like consensus.
Is there anyone that intends to read it?
I could read it.
Okay, is there a consensus to have it read? Jeff?
Doesn't matter to me.
Could you just say yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, Randy?
I've read it, so no.
Brad?
I've read it, no.
Gail?
I've read it, no.
Mark?
I've read it, no.
Tom?
I could read it.
Okay, we do not have a consensus to have it read. It will be part of the record and be included as an addendum to the minutes when they're approved at a future council meeting. Okay, other comments, question, or discussion? Tom?
Yeah, I would say this was very, very clever on our Councilman Elfridge in the last meeting or meeting to put this in here, and I assumed, and I guess I picked that up wrong, that we were getting rid of we were gonna put the water one up for a vote, but so I didn't catch that, so that was a pretty clever thing, in my opinion, to do. So what we're doing is we're piling on, and when I was talking about, and you asked me about getting in the folks' pocket, that's what I was talking about. And I guess part of my question on this thing is, I believe we already passed a resolution on ordinance 374 to put some suppression fees on water. And now, in this one, we're getting rid of ordinance 374 and adding ordinance 416, which I assume it doesn't say anything about the suppression fee on water. So I guess by passing this ordinance, you've dropped the resolution on a suppression fee for water, which I'm good with. But now you're putting a suppression fee on power so that you get more customers, you make more money, you're going after people all the way to Bridalveil, and I think you're gonna have issues with that. So, this is, we just keep it, it's about money, and it continues to be about money, and it continues to be about manipulating the thing as much as we can to get as much as we can, and that's what this ordinance is about right here again. It's to get in your pockets, folks. That's how I see it.
So, Paul, correct me, stop me if you've said this already, but this is a referral to the voters, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that'll be the voters getting into their own
The
pocket.
voters of the citizens of Cascade lots.
Yeah, if they pass it, that's
Right.
right. Any other questions, comments, or discussion?
So,
Oh, you do, okay.
there's just one more on that. So I brought up then, let me ask our lawyer, because we're repealing 374, which we put a resolution against 374 already, part of our budget, to go after suppression for water. But that doesn't seem to be in 418 or 416, or is it in 416? I didn't see it in there.
The repeal is in section 3,
Section 3 of 416?
yes.
Right. I'm saying I'm repealing 374, but is there, in this one, it's all, it seems to be talking about electrical. I don't see anything in here talking about about fire. I mean, not the water. Because 374 is all about water, right?
Yes,
And it looks like 416 is all about power.
correct.
Correct. So does that mean that the resolution that the council passed on suppression fee for water, once this is repealed, is no longer in effect?
If this is repealed, then it would, I'm not sure what you're saying, because if, we're talking about passing it, not repealing it.
We're passing over section, what was it, section 3? It says ordinance 374 is repealed.
Through the passage of 416.
Through the passage of
Right,
416.
416. So now that means 374 is gone,
Yes.
correct?
Repeat.
Right, so it's gone, which means any kind of resolution that was attached to 374 is gone with it.
Yes.
Right. So, okay, so then what you're telling me is we, by passing this, by giving this to the citizens, we're dropping the water suppression money, and we're acquiring, now, electrical suppression money.
We're putting it to the voters.
Right.
On whether they want to drop that
Right.
and do the electrical suppression.
Right. So what will happen with that vote is there will be no water. So if they vote for this, there'll be no water suppression, there will be suppression fee on electrical.
I would have to verify that by reading 374 again and reviewing that, but if that's your understanding, then so be it.
Well,
I don't have 374 in front of me, so.
But part of the, just to clarify, Tom, if I could, part of the referral, part of the
Okay, excuse me, I
The
have,
referral process is that if we refer it, it actually goes to you, and you do that
correct,
review.
correct, yes.
So you don't have to do it right now in the next 2 minutes.
Well, I have
The
to,
the referral process includes a time for you to review it.
agreed, and actually I have 374 here, and it doesn't repeal, there are no, things that it, repeals. It doesn't repeal any other ordinances.
It repeals 374, which is an ordinance.
416 repeals 374, but
Right.
having 374 repealed doesn't get rid of, doesn't have a effect on any other ordinances.
Right, it only has an effect on that ordinance, and that ordinance has a resolution in it that they just passed for suppression for fire. Because it already had the $1, now it's been bumped up by resolution.
Yeah,
So then all of that would go if this was passed.
it would all go to the voters, yes.
Yeah, so if they passed it, that would go.
If the voters pass it, yes.
Right, okay, that's,
Sorry, I just didn't realize I had 374,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
but, so what are we saying here then, that we're gonna give this back to them and say, start piling on, or what?
I'm not gonna say that to them, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but no, I'm not gonna say, let's start piling it on. You know, what we're doing, as the motion and the item said, is we're initiating the referral process by referring ordinance 416 to voters.
So why would you have gone through the process of a resolution to tack fees onto water, and now you're sitting here going, and if they pass this, then that's gonna go away from it, 'cause I assume you want all that.
I can answer that, Lance.
Okay, do you mind if we move to
Sure,
another
go.
comment? Okay.
416 was brought as a legislative action by what's required by the charter. It's not administrative in nature, it's legislative in nature. And with that legislative action, it requires the vote of the people. And the vote of the people will have a thumbs up or thumbs down whether they support the fire department and the EMS department by this vote. Then 374, correct me if I'm wrong, 374, that ordinance that we enacted the resolution that we enacted for 2 years with the sunset would go away. That transfer, that fire suppression fee from the water meter to the electrical meter and how it's billed out. And it actually lowered, if you look at the actuaries that we looked at, and where the monies are at, from what the first, when we passed it first, to what the actual actuaries are. That's what the intent is, that's what the voters wanted, that's what people sat in this room last time asked and wanted. So we brought it forward to have that vote. If you support the fire department EMS through this, this is a funding source available to do that. So it's continuing on through the process in which we've had the Public Safety Task Force meetings and all the input for that. That's what this is about. They asked for it, this is what we have, you let the voters talk about it. And that's what we've talked about, and that's what you're kind of getting at. And it gets rid of the fire suppression fee on the meter, which I'm, quote, sticking it to them, and it's not that, we're removing it, giving the voters an opportunity to vote on it.
Good? Oh.
Just meter counts, it was asked earlier, do these meters, are they just, it says inside city limits. So there's no fee being assessed outside city limits? Or would this, passing this,
If this were
put
to
it on
pass,
to all
I
utility bills?
think the intent is that it would be all meters, all electric meters in your system, as opposed to all water meters which are inside the city.
Do we know how many additional meters are outside the city limits?
I do not readily have that information here. We know that you're looking at 708 electric meters.
That says inside city limits.
I'd have to check.
So the rate should go down. Do we know how much it should go down? Yeah.
Go down, well, if you look at the actuaries, where your estimated rate is either $3, $5, or $7, and it shows you what that would be in reference to what the water meter would be. I mean, you reduce it all the way, and the intent's not to go outside of the city limits. It's not my intent where the voters don't have an opportunity to vote on that. I think it's within the city limits, because we're providing that service within the city limits.
So Randy, I think you'd look at those different options, and you'd find out where the rate would fit. Okay, Gail?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, my understanding was this was just gonna be within the city. And I don't know the specific current arrangement, but it used to be that, South Bank for fire had to pay for fire coverage. Do we provide fire coverage to South Bank now?
Well, we do. They're actually part of our ambulance district.
They are.
And so is all the way up to Viento.
Only the Multnomah Falls, not the Bridal.
But South Bank starts at Multnomah Falls. That's the terminus of our electrical lines.
South Bank starts as soon as Cascade lines.
On one end, and on the other, it depends on where you want to start. It either
Yeah.
starts or ends at Multnomah Falls.
Well, okay, then if they're part of our coverage area, then I don't have as many concerns. I just didn't want to apply in a fee to somebody outside our coverage area.
So just to kind of refresh the discussion though, we're not applying a fee here, we're initiating a referral process. Okay, we're referring this to the voters, it's a legislative action, as Jeff mentioned. Okay, Brad?
And per meter, yes, more meters, but per meter, the fee would be less, right? So it's, instead of being like $8, it would be, for instance, $5.
Yeah, you would
So
expect it to be less.
If there was a fee.
If the voters chose to accept this and fund the fire department.
Okay.
And for businesses, it could be significantly less, just by looking at the different options that Jeff has mentioned.
So that's money spread over more people, so it's everybody.
And you're including people in our ambulance district.
Yeah, well, that's one way to look at it, which we had that conversation, when you brought it on up. There wasn't any of that conversation, it was just bang, we're out here, this is what we're doing. And the deal is, everything on here is showing 700, not 400 people or meters. And, yeah, we've got 3, 5, and 7, and everything most of what I see around here is we go is, we get a bunch of options, and we take the highest option whenever we can, so, yeah, I don't totally buy it, but, sounds good, but, so at least I understand clearly that it's going to the vote, and it's electrical. Now the water's out of it. There isn't anything, if this passes, the water's out. If it doesn't pass though, the water is in it. So you're, you know, you can be, you're gonna pay either way, so.
Yeah, Jeff?
Lose.
Well, you don't pay either way. If the voters vote it down, they don't vote it down, and then within 2 years, we have to figure out as a community how we want to fund the fire department. So there's that right there. And the other part of that is it wasn't bang, we're out of here and pushing this through. That's why I had it brought back to council, so we had the opportunity to educate people and talk about this in a manner in which people had asked questions. That wasn't banging it through last time. I take exception to that because we're having a conversation about it. This is where we get educated.
Well, and I'll just add to that too, that ordinance 416 was first proposed to the council in our packet over a month ago. So it's not any bang, bang, bang. It's been a month where we've had access to it. It was suggested 2 weeks ago that it come back. Further comment, question, or discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of initiating the referral process for ordinance 416 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Of course.
Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, we'll turn now to next item on our agenda, which is to approve language for a charter amendment referral. And Kathy, I understand you'll be doing the report?
Actually, I will defer to the attorney.
Okay. Ruben?
Okay, on page 2, there's document steps and timeline for city council referral of charter amendment. And if you look down at the bottom of the page, it will have the current language, and then some suggested language to refer to the voters. And basically what this would do would clarify what is allowed as legislative versus administrative actions. And the main clarification point would be in the last 2 sentences. This provision shall not apply to utility rate setting for any city-owned utility. And then goes on to define what city-owned utility is, and includes what's pertinent there as far as the city's utility involvements. What would happen is this would be, if this language were accepted, then I would begin preparing it for the ballot, and it would go to the voters to amend that language.
Okay. Thank you, Ruben. We did not have anyone sign up to comment on this. So we'll move now to a motion and second by the council.
I'll make a motion to approve the language for the charter amendment referral.
Okay, motion's been made by Brad. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Second by Jeff. Okay, time now for council comment, question, or discussion. Tom?
Well, here we go again on, it's pretty clear what the citizens voted on. It was pretty simple, what they voted on. And it's pretty simple to get the feel of what they are after. They weren't comfortable with just the council's raising rates and everything on them, and taxes and fees and all that. They weren't comfortable with it. They want to be a little more involved in it. And you're sending something back to them to say, give it to us, folks. Give it to us, and we'll take care of you. And again, my opinion is we're going to take care of it because all this other stuff. Once we get this, the other fees we put on you, we're going to keep tacking it. We're going to keep tacking it on And now, I guess part of my question again here would be, what is a rate, like an example, a rate would be what you're gonna pay for power, but would a rate be, a meter fee? So you could raise the cost of, you could raise the cost of power, could you also raise the cost of meter fees? Or a variety of other fees that go along with the power company or water company or all that?
Yes, generally, yes. It would be ultimately up to the interpretation of the council as far as interpreting the charter. However, this does bear in mind that things such as fees and rates would be applied.
So we can go beyond what Bonneville charges us, 'cause that's what we worry about is Bonneville, but we can go beyond that. We can go beyond what Fox and HP and all that charges. Whatever they charge us, we can go beyond that. So this basically eliminates, that referendum. Certainly for all utilities, and that's really what our city is a city of utilities. That's what we provide.
Well, I agree that it eliminates it only in that it clarifies it, and that the current referendum is not accurate in distinguishing between legislative versus administrative actions.
Okay. Thank you.
So I just want to clarify too, though, something Tom just said, is that we can go beyond what Bonneville charges us for electricity or what Fox charges us for TV or HBO, is that's what we do. I mean, that it's not just we pass on the costs that we have to pay, because we also have to maintain and operate a system. So we always have to have something above what we pay for it. And that's, I think that's not just the city, that's just about any business or government entity that provides services. They do charge more for it because you have to. It's not as if, HBO delivers the channel directly to the home. We actually deliver the channel to the home. It's not as if Bonneville runs wires through Cascade locks and through South Bank. We do that. And so the cost of operating and maintaining the system has to be covered. Jeff?
No, just put it.
Brad, did you have your hand up?
And also, this does not set aside the initiative from 2008, because there are still right now there's 425 some odd fees that the city cannot adjust without a vote of the people. And many of those utilities many of those fees would still be in place and could not be affected without a vote of the people. This only affects the utilities, which is a very small part of that 425 fees. So I would say that this does not set aside the initiative 2008. And also, once again, the people voted in 2008, and all laws have a way of changing over time. People's attitudes change, people's understanding about what they voted for changes, and we're putting this through a process where the people will have a chance to get the information and once again decide what the direction is. So, this goes to the people, so.
Tom?
Yeah, I think the issue is that the people felt that they had poor administration, poor leadership, and it shows in how their city is financially, how a lot of our departments are financially and where we're at. So the citizens recognized poor leadership, poor administration. They're attempting to do something to wrestle some of that back to themselves, and obviously we're trying to wrestle that back away from them. So that's how
No, we're trying to give them a chance to decide again.
okay, that's good.
Again.
Hey,
I'm done.
okay. thank you. So just to, I think it's worth us mentioning now, that because it has been a frequent comment that people were unhappy with, as you put it, poor leadership and poor administration. And I think it's worth mentioning now that as we move forward, you know, my perception is you're referring to an administration and leadership that's no longer with the city. Unless you're referring to Paul and his leadership and his administration, is that, I mean, because you've also mentioned several times that, what's that?
Not Paul, it's his administration.
Okay, so he's the administrator. So I think it's worth mentioning that has changed, so, okay.
Council's a lot of the same council.
Council has also changed a couple of times since then, so. Okay, any more questions, comments, or discussion? Yeah, Paul.
Could I ask a question of the attorney?
Sure.
Ruben, is it possible for the council, if it would desire to move forward with this, to clarify or define a difference between an electric or a water or sewer rate versus a fee, which may be a hookup fee or a water meter fee or some kind of a service fee? Is it possible to define that so that, and I'm not sure where council is trying to go on this, but that their rate issue would be very clear to the citizens?
Yes, I mean, we certainly at this point can refine whatever language is necessary to get this on the ballot in a suitable fashion.
Okay, so the motion before us now is to approve this language. Are you talking about if this motion passes, we could still refine it? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, we would need to go back to the drawing board to refine it. But-
Tom? Do you have any?
Yeah, that's what, I mean, apparently the issue is administrative and legislative, and that's where we're at here. We want, the council wants as much to be as administrative as they can, because that takes everything out of the vote of the people. They want legislative, don't they? Administrative is where the people can get. Where's legislative?
The people,
Which one has the council got total control on, the people, and the people?
administrative is what the council has
Okay,
control
that's-
over, the people have control over legislative.
Legislative.
Yes.
So we're trying to get as much into administrative as we can and out of legislative.
We're trying to clarify what's administrative and what's legislative.
So we could, and following through on Paul's, we can put some of these things over into, if we choose. And we could say that this is administrative, this is legislative,
Yes,
on
and
anything we charge.
and basically the purpose of this is to put it to a vote instead of going to court and having a court determine that it's administrative and not legislative.
Further question, comment, or discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of approving the language for our charter amendment referral signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move now to 3 items, one at a time, that we've added to our agenda at the beginning of the meeting. The first one is the approval of an electric rate study contract and scope of work. Paul, will you be presenting this step?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Mayor, members of City Council, you should have in front of you staff report for agenda item number 5F. This deals with the contract and scope of work with the firm Kaiser, Brown Kaiser, that you selected to do the electric rate study, help the city deal with the substation issue and come up with a proposed electric rate structure that would facilitate economic development. So as we have worked through this process, now you have in front of you the contract between the city and the firm, as well as the scope of work with a schedule that should have this work done for your decision-making in December of 2012. The contract would need to be changed so that Lance Armstrong becomes Lance Masters.
We need to test them on that, I think.
And this is, you have
I only have 3 speeds on my license.
in the approved budget for this year, you have $60,000 set aside in the electric department budget under materials and services for this project. We're recommending that the cost not exceed $40,000. We have to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Paul. We did not have anyone sign up to speak to this agenda item. Since it was a last minute, it was added to the agenda over here, but since it was a last minute addition at the beginning of our meeting, is there anyone now that would like to speak to it? Okay. Paul?
Mayor, just one other point. If you'll remember, council, at the time that you set your priorities, the issue was tier 2 and when do you spill over into tier 2. So one of the driving forces behind this particular study is what is your rate going to look like once you spill over into tier 2. We think at this point that it may not be as severe as we had initially estimated, but we don't know. What's the impact of the city taking on the substation that BPA will push you to have, and what will that do to your rates, and what kind of conditions would we have? And then in reference to some of the concerns mentioned by folks in economic development, how do we get to the point where our electric rates facilitate economic development? We don't know if we're there. The firm that we had interviewed and recommended and you approved does have experience in doing economic facilitating rates in other communities. So there's still a lot of work to do. The work plan itself calls for a number of community meetings and an educational component so that the community is brought along in the process. So I just didn't want people to think this is pure and simple a rate effort. It's not. You know from your discussions with Tracy and with other consultants that the tier 2 issue could be pretty big for the community.
Okay. Thank you. We'll proceed now to a council motion and second.
I'll move we approve the electrical rate study and scope of work as presented.
Okay, motion by Randy. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Gail. Time now for council question, comment, or discussion. Gail?
Has the contract been reviewed by our attorney?
Yeah.
Tom?
Yeah, I would just say the same thing, as we're looking at this, I've never seen a rate study that didn't come back and say, you need more money. So, those are one of the things that citizens gotta remember here, there's lots of things that coming down the pipe here on you for money, and again, when you look at it as individual things, it doesn't seem like much. But when you add them all together, it just grows and grows and grows. Because there's not only this, and I'm in favor of the study, but that's how it's going to, they're going to come back. Because you're going to have waters also, and I know that isn't part of this, but water is an issue for us too. So just be aware that there's going to be more money, and obviously that is part of growth and part of things going on. But it is our job to manage that as well as we possibly can, to keep it as inexpensive pieces as we can, and that's hopefully what we can do. I'm not sure that is all being done, but hopefully that's the direction we do. But there's lots of things that are going on, and just as Brad said, when you look at 400 fees, and one fee only costs you 50 cents, but if you got 400 fees against you, all of a sudden that could be lots of dollars, and that's what happens to you. It just keeps going. But be aware, and a lot of this isn't our fault. A lot of it, this is the way the world is, and I would say we're doing the right thing here to make a study on it. But odds are, folks, there's going to be some more money coming in. Yep.
Tom, or Mark?
Yeah, I was in on the meeting here with Brown and Kaiser, and one of the things that really was a huge plus, I think, is that they're willing to meet, have town hall meetings and answer some of the tough questions that, you know, the citizens have, because I'd rather have it from, you know, as a professional, you know, them being professional, I think they know the, you know, some of the answers. Plus, they're experts on the transformer, some of the questions that we have on the transformer. You know, there's gonna be some tough questions, and they're, like I say again, they're open to, you know, citizens and having the town hall meetings. So I think that would help with the rate study too. I mean, I think, you know, I think power doesn't go down. I think it goes up, and you know, maybe tier 2 isn't that bad, you know, that bad of a thing. So.
Mayor, if I could, I think Councilman Cranwell is absolutely right. This does not lock you into any rate structure. This merely gets you to the position of understanding what is the impact of the substation and tier 2, and what kind of rates would you be looking at. Doesn't mean that you have to adopt those, but it will give you that knowledge and understanding of where you could be, not where you need to be.
And I'll add to that, part of this rate study is the scope of the work here is also that through our partnership with the port, we've been investigating the possibility of a rate that would help to facilitate economic development. That's what the port's come to us and asked for, and that's part of the scope of work. So as we try to invest in this community and provide services for our residents and our businesses, and as well as attract other businesses, it's important to have that information as part of the rate study as well. So it is somewhat comprehensive in that it's giving us information that we're going to need as we try to move forward in developing the economy here in Cascade Locks. I also think you're right to point out, Tom, that you know, in the world, as the world consumes more energy, there's you know, the law of supply and demand comes into play, and costs do go up, and that's true of a lot of services that municipalities provide. So it's something to be aware of. Well, you know, I think the purpose of this rate study is to balance those increased costs with the best we can do to provide exceptional services for our residents, businesses, and visitors, which is our goal as a council. So, back to you, Tom.
Yeah, I talked to my nephew today. He's heading for North Dakota. That's the gold strike over there. There's more oil over there than there's in Saudi Arabia. Of course, so there's refineries going in, there's pipelines going in, there's the whole thing. So it's and there's a law of supply and demand. If we can create enough supply, then we possibly can bring the rates down a little bit. If what's going on in North Dakota pans out, who knows?
Yeah, but they're not generating electricity there, are they?
Well, that's what you do with a lot of plants are natural gas or oil fired.
They're building electrical plants in.
Well, they're getting oil for electrical plants. They're building refineries. We haven't built refineries in very many refineries in a lot of last years.
But
North Dakota's looking at refineries.
Boomtown, yeah. Okay, Jeff.
With the comment with supply and demand, Paul, with this rate study, is there another company out there as a part of this rate study that would allow the supply or the demand to go down by conservation, which means the greener products that are out there, the ability to have smarter energy consuming products and availability for our citizens to tap into that?
I would assume that there would be. In fact, there is a program that we met with last week that's an expansion of some effort that's being carried out in Portland that will come here, that will work on that particular issue.
Okay.
Clearly, in the energy community, reducing the amount that is used has to be part of that. And again, this is where your rate structure can help you do that. What's the benefit for the average citizen of reducing use? In most communities, it's your rate goes up, but there have to be other tools that are in there, and we'll look at those in this process.
Further comment, question, or discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
I got one last question. Too late?
It's not too late to ask it, but we've already voted, so you're not.
That doesn't relate to the vote.
Okay.
Hey, Paul, just a question for you.
Yes.
So this was prepared on June 29th, but it wasn't in our packet.
That's correct. Because
Okay, I'll ask the goddamn question.
yeah, my report was prepared, waiting for the firm to complete their work on the scope, and get the contracts to
Okay.
me so that I could stick it all together.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, thank you.
Okay, we'll move now to our next item, which was also added at the beginning of the meeting. And it is to approve the lease agreement to place a charging station on city property in Eastgate Park. Kathy, will you be doing the report on this? Or are we gonna rely on Jeff from the company?
Jeff is here, I would.
Jeff, are you prepared to give a brief report to us?
Sure.
Okay, would you take the seat next to Paul?
While Jeff is getting ready, just to kind of bring council up to date, the ODOT has contracted with a firm to provide electric car charging stations in a wide variety of places in the state. At one time, in Cascade locks, last summer, there was discussion that the best location would be the Best Western motel parking lot. That was not desirable in terms of the Best Western folks. It then moved to the parking lot of the grocery store. And I don't know what happened there, but that didn't materialize. The firm who has the contract with ODOT has identified the parking lot over by the cemetery as the most ideal location. And that's how we got to where we're at today.
My name is Jeff Colantino. I work for a company called Cascade PM. We are actually contracted by AeroVironment, which is the company to which Paul was referring. AeroVironment manufactures the electric car charging stations, and they also cover the costs of the units themselves, the installation, construction, monthly utilities, all of that. AeroVironment is not asking for any funds, any money, anything like that from the city of Cascade Locks. Essentially, just looking for 3 parking spaces in the parking lot over by the cemetery. In return, we would be handling, AeroVironment would be handling the construction, the coordination, all of that. The city would also receive 5% of the gross revenues that AeroVironment receives from folks coming in using the electric charging stations. As previously indicated, we had approached the Best Western initially. We were in discussions with them. I met with them on a couple of occasions. Unfortunately, they decided not to pursue the lease agreement with AeroVironment. We did also approach the Cascade Market. There was some initial interest there. We sent over some documentation, spoke with the owner as well. I met with him personally on the property. After sending over the information and following up on that, we hadn't received any additional comments or feedback, and so AeroVironment indicated that the parking lot over by the cemetery would be a good, desirable location. It has easy access to utilities, good level space right there, short drive or walking distance to amenities within the town of Cascade Locks. And so essentially, that's why I'm here in front of you today.
Thank you very much. We'll move now to citizen comment. We had a couple people sign up to speak to this. First, Tiffany.
I really only have one question, and that is, I saw nowhere in the contract where it stated that they would be billed for the electricity used. Is that accurate?
No one in contract with the city would be billed?
Yes.
Correct. AeroVironment would
well,
contract with the city, and the monthly utility bill would go directly to AeroVironment.
Okay, but that's not addressed in the contract.
I believe the utilities, that there's a section there where under access to utilities. I don't know
understanding Tiffany, they would be billed by the city for the electricity that's used.
Okay, but it's not addressed in the contract. That's all, that's the only thing that I
So Paul, if any business were to start in Cascade Box and look to electrical services, would they go through the same procedure as any business coming to town? For example, if someone
Correct.
wanted to open up a fish market and they wanted electricity, they would contact City Hall and set up an
And
account.
then they would be connected, and then they would be, the account would be created, and they would be billed on a monthly basis.
And is this contract just for a lease of the property?
Yes, for the lease of the 3 parking spaces, with the understanding that they would pay for the connection fee for electricity and the monthly bill, and then they would rebate 5% of their gross back to the city.
But this lease is just for
That's
property,
right.
not
That's
for
correct.
the electricity.
Yes.
Okay, did you want to speak?
Well, yes, I did. I just wanted to ask, my name is Virginia Fitzpatrick, and I was just wondering, has there been any study done? How necessary is this? I was over at Skamania, over at Stevenson, and there was one of those little gas pump, which is electrical charger there. And, I don't know, has anyone done any research to see how necessary it is? Or is it just some idea that sounds good? I don't know.
Well, ODOT has
Did
done
the
it.
research?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
they
what
might-
they've decided to do, just as they've done already up and down the coast, they created some charging stations just about every city. They've determined that this is good for the gorge too, and so they've contacted the city and asked to have us open up. So, Kate, was that your question?
That was my question.
Kate, did you also want to speak?
My only question was, why
Would you come to the microphone, please?
are we giving it to the cemetery, but Paul already answered that
Okay.
question? Thank you.
Move now to council motion and second.
I make a motion to approve the ground lease agreement with Aero Environment Incorporated.
Second?
Okay, motion by Jeff, second by Randy. Time for council comment, question, or discussion. Gail?
Is there gonna be some kind of identifier on the devices of who to contact if they got questions or problems?
Yes, absolutely. There will be information on the unit itself. There's also a screen that will have information as far as the status of the unit. Should anything happen, there will be an 800 number where you can contact Aero Environment, and they'll have a local contractor come out and do any maintenance or repairs as required.
And that's 7x24?
Correct.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this, and I'm glad ODOT's looking at Cascade Lots for something like that, because, I mean, to me, that's the direction a lot of things are heading, is towards the electrical car, at least part of our, how we operate things. And the nice thing about it is, I don't know how long it takes to charge a car, the person got to stop, where everybody comes into town, takes off, at least they got, once they're there, plug into that thing, they gotta stay there for a while, and it gives them an opportunity to, there's little rings, and head downtown, and all that stuff, so.
Are the
Get ice
cemetery,
cream going, the better, get an ice cream coming. So, yeah, it's, I'm glad the state's doing this, and it looks like they're pretty well spread out. I know the I-5 corridor was first the big thing, and now we're already seeing the branch out nicely.
Mark?
I just want to thank your company for coming to town, and what Tom was saying, I think once they park, waiting for their charge, then they can investigate our town and check things out, and that's a good visiting tool. So, thanks.
Jeff?
I support the new energy alternative sources for vehicles, but the question I have, and we talked about it in the report, how will this, or I don't think you're going to see a lot of use out of it, but bumping us up towards that tier 2 of power, if we're creating just charging station with that, it's just a question of that. What's the anticipated use? If that bumps us closer to that tier 2, if we're not going to be able to provide that economic development, I know it's one or the other, you can't have both, so that's kind of the question to ask here.
Got a question for me?
Somebody, yeah.
So, but I think this is part of the mix for moving your community forward with economic development. There are certain things that you have to be able to accommodate And Virginia raises, a good point. What is the need? Well, somebody in Salem has determined that we're gonna have these things all over the state. And they've contracted with a company to do that, so you either go with the flow or you become the town that doesn't have that. And then the electric cars make it to the next nearest location. But I think, Jeff, that also points out, as we do the rate study, we're gonna have to begin factoring all of those elements in, because we could see more of this kind of electric generation be developed.
Gail?
How long does it take to charge one?
Oh, I'm sorry.
How long does it take to charge?
You're just answering that question as well. There'll be 2 charging units installed. One is called a level 2 charger. The other is what they call a level 3 DC fast charger. The level 2 charger is what people are a little more used to seeing. Depending on how depleted the battery is, looking at about up to 4 to 6 hours if the battery is really low, really depleted. The DC fast charger, on the other hand, will do an 80% charge in approximately 20 minutes.
Okay.
So you could either stop and go fishing,
Oh, I'm not.
or, no, someone else with an electric car.
Well, I didn't know if they could, I didn't know if it'd help people stay
Eat an
overnight.
ice cream cone while you're fishing?
You could
Or you can go to Sternwiller, if you do the long charge, you do, Sternwiller and have a dinner, come back. Yeah.
So I'm gonna take a charge this turn. Randy?
So, cost, is it the cost the same, whether you do the fast charge or slow charge?
Well,
How do you,
in all honesty, they're still finalizing the fees, because as a part of the process to finalize everything, as you know, you can't resell electricity. AeroVironment can't charge for the electricity itself. It's going to be a time of use sort of deal. But the DC fast charger will likely cost a little bit more versus the slow charger, simply because that's going to be for the people who are willing to pay a slight premium to have it done a little bit quicker. Somebody who's passing through, say, to Hood River or on the way to Portland, they want to stop, get a charge, they'll be willing to pay a little bit more of a premium. The estimate right now for the fast charge, I've heard in the ballpark of about $5 to $10.
thanks.
Okay, Ben.
I think this is great. Currently, I know there's the Leaf. How many vehicles are there currently, and I'm assuming there's several others in the works that will be coming out in production in the next year or two?
There are, yes. As you mentioned, the Chevy Volt, which also has a gas engine, but can also be charged up with electric power. There's the Mitsubishi something like that. It's I think they just call it Mitsubishi Scion has one coming out that's electric. Essentially, all of the major manufacturers are coming out with some variation of an electric charger. The charging units that we're installing will have a plug that is going to be more or less universal. There are some that are proprietary, like Tesla, but those have a much longer range and are considerably more expensive as well.
Sounds good. Sounds like it's the way it's going.
Yeah, speaking of that, I had the experience of driving up and down the Oregon coast the last 4 days with my family, and one of the things we noticed as we're driving our Dodge van, gasoline van, that gets less than 10 miles a gallon, is there's these signs on Highway 101, electric charging station, take a right, take a left, and I actually did drive up to one of them just for the irony of it, but I just wonder, are we gonna get a sign right there on I-84 saying exit here, charge your car?
As a part of the ODOT program, there will be signs along the highway, just as there are now for gas, food, and lodging. There'll be signs in both directions guiding people in, okay, Cascade logs, your charging unit is here. The vehicles themselves also have GPS units, and they will let you know if there's a charging unit coming up, take this exit. In addition to that, ODOT and for that matter, Washington, we're working with both states. They are also rolling out a very large marketing program so that as the charging stations come online, there will be considerable fanfare. They've had various different senators coming up and down I-5 with electric vehicles, checking out some of the installations along there.
like to get Earl Blumenauer and Greg Walden to meet in Cascade Lofts.
For 6 hours.
For 6 hours. Okay, Dale will take him on his boat. Okay, any more questions, comment, or discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Okay. We'll move now to last action item, and that is appointing Emergency Services Department volunteers to a permanent status and authorizing 7 new recruits to a probationary status. Paul, will you be doing this stuff?
Yes, I will, Your Honor. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, this is item number 5H, and it recommends that you approve 15 fire department volunteers to permanent status. If you'll recall, back in February when we came forward after interviewing everyone, we recommended a 6-month probationary period. Chief Wells has completed the evaluation, and so he's recommending that those 15 members be made permanent volunteers and removing them from probationary status. And there are 6, not 7. At the time I wrote this, there were 7. But just before the council meeting, we discovered that that one of them did not have all of the paperwork in, and we're very careful to make sure all the paperwork is in. So we're asking that you approve 15 permanent volunteers to the Emergency Services Department and 6 probationary volunteers.
Thank you, Paul. We did not have anyone sign up to speak on this, so but it was a last-minute addition. If there's anyone that would like to come to the microphone now, do that.
Is there a memo that goes with this?
It's a staff report that
Yes.
Paul
Is
just
that
covered.
what this is right here?
Yes,
Yeah, there it is.
There it is.
Did you want to
I don't know.
address the council? Okay. All right, so having none, then we'll move to council motion and second.
I'll move we approve the list of 15 to the permanent status, and also the 6 to the probationary status.
Okay, the motion is by Randy. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second is by Jeff. Time for council question, comment, or discussion. Gail?
Is there any short, immediate expenses related with these people?
No, there are not.
Tom?
I didn't read the, I haven't had time to read that report on, but, well, I don't know if it said anything about whether they made to, this is just a recommendation moving in. I know we
That's
were
the
looking at,
motion.
yeah, we were, looking at, getting the firefighter 1 status as close as we could with the newer recruits. How do we, I know we were trying to get that within the 6-month period. Do you know how close we are to?
I don't, but I can
Fire
check
level
that.
1, okay. Thank you.
Further comment, question, or discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, I am going to ask for council consensus to move one of our presentations to next on the agenda. Wayne Stewart is here from the Historic Highway Advisory Committee. He's patiently waited through our action items, so I would prefer to move him next, and then we'll continue on with the existing agenda. Is there any objection to that? Okay. See you nine, Wayne. Thanks for waiting.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate you coming here. Wayne is the chair of the Historic Highway Advisory Committee. Those of you who've been driving either to and from Portland, you've seen some of the work just outside of Yeon Park. There's been those big boulders put in place to create the framework for the new addition to the historic highway. I had the opportunity last week, a week before, to take a tour of the work that ODOT has been doing. The Mayor of Troutdale and I, as well as a few other people from ODOT and Metro, went on a tour of the historic highway, and we looked at what's in the works now and what we're projecting to be done by 2016. On one of those hikes, Wayne approached me and asked to come talk to the council about one of the initiatives of the Historic Highway Advisory Committee, and I thought it was a great idea, and so I suggested that he come make a presentation to the council. So that's what he's here to do, and we really do appreciate having you here, Wayne. Thank you for coming all the way out.
Thank you. Mayor and council members, Wayne Stewart, I'm, as the mayor said, the chair of the advisory committee. And we have been working since, well, the committee has been working since 1987, trying to reconnect the historic highway. It was severed, as I think you all know, during the construction of I-84 and so on. And so ODOT has been charged by the legislature to restore the existing portions of the highway, to reconnect as part of a state trail. And that work has been going on for some time. And at this point, I'm very pleased to say that we've got the last missing link between Troutdale and Cascade locks under construction. I think some of you have seen the construction going on along there. And that work is supposed to be finished by sometime next summer. The contractor has until fall of 2013 to finish the work. The work is going, as I understand it, faster than anticipated, and the contractor is hopeful to finish up next summer. So once that occurs, then people will be able to ride a bike or ride a bike from Troutdale through Cascade Locks, basically all the way to Wyatt using the Wyatt Bench Road. So this has been our missing link, and we've been working very hard on trying to get funding for that. We're fortunate to be able to cobble together enough funding to make that happen. So what we're trying to do next is, part of this legislation also included encouraging economic development in the gorge community. And as part of that, what we would like to do, and this is the handout with the second. Sure. This large handout shows the areas that we're in the process of trying to see if we can convert the designation of the roadways to historic Route 30. And we've started that program. On the upper part, which is the existing conditions, you'll notice down near the left-hand edge, there's a scenic byway called the western section, and over to the east, over around Mosier, is a eastern section of the byway. The western section, we did obtain funding several years ago for signage, and the new signage is in place. And attached to this is the byway sign, just as an illustration of what it looks like. And then the historic Route 30 signage, which has a brown background. Unfortunately, we only have black and whites, but you know, imagine brown. So what we are doing is we've talked to the byways organization about trying to expand the areas that would be designated as byways. And we want to be able to extend it to include Warrendale out to the start of the trail that's under construction currently. That's at the John Young parking lot. We'd also like, if it's acceptable to the city, to extend the historic Route 30 designation or signage program through Cascade Locks. We would also like, at some point, to use the Wyatt Bench Road as a reasonable connector for the historic highway, although it never was part of the historic highway, but it is an existing road that makes some sense as part of continuity for bikers and presumably for hikers and obviously for automobile use, it's perfectly adequate. So that's what we're asking for, and these areas that are indicated in yellow are the areas where we would like to be able to improve the signage program and hopefully hopefully, as we keep moving forward, more and more we'll be able to add to the continuity so that when we have tourists, recreationists looking to find the historic highway, they will be able to see the historic Route 30 designation and follow it all the way through from Troutdale to the Dalles. So what we're asking for at this point is ODOT will look into changing the designation, and unfortunately we've got all kinds of designations of various pieces of the highway. Sometimes it's called the Old Historic Highway, sometimes it's Historic Highway, occasionally it's Route 30. Now we've got some parts that are historic Route 30. As you go through the cities, they're designated with city street names. So we're trying to get some continuity, and we found that as we went and looked at some of the information on the web pages, looked at maps and so forth, that you've got all these variety of names. And in talking to a number of recreationists, it seems like the historic Route 30 idea seems the one that resonates pretty well with tourists. So we're trying to use that as our common theme throughout. So what we're asking, if it's acceptable to the city, is a letter of support asking ODOT to go ahead and figure out how to make this change. There's some work that has to be done that have to go to probably the Oregon Transportation Commission to make sure that we have approvals there. There's a chance that it may have to go to Washington, D.C. I hope not. So the intent is to try and fly under the radar a little bit, see if we can stay with, if there's agreement among the cities and the counties, go only as far as the Oregon Transportation Commission and see what we can do. So that's what we're asking for. I have a sample of a letter, and I guess I can give that. This is from the city of Mosher. It's just a sample of the letter that they sent. It's a letter of support. That's all we're asking for at this time. That's all I had to say. And Mr. Mayor, any questions, or council members, any questions?
Yeah, Jeff?
One of the things you touched on was signage and then economic impacts, the other question I have. But for this, what's the advertising that you guys do? Because, you know, growing up, went to the Oregon Trail in Nebraska and started from Chimney Rock all the way out, and seeing that, I see this as a viable economic source, but I also look at the advertising. How do you do the advertising for this, and where does that get? Come see Cascade Locks here. How do you get that media now?
Well, right now we're working with Travel Oregon, and Travel Oregon puts out materials every year, and they're currently starting on a study, statewide study of bicycle tourism, and they're looking into what are the economic impacts of bicycle tourism. We're trying to obtain some additional funding for the gorge area specifically, so we can piggyback on that statewide study and take a better look at what are the future impacts of completion of the state trail, development of the mountain biking areas that you've got going on around here, and so forth. So over time, a lot of these various maps and documents and so forth are starting to pick up on this historic Route 30 and certainly the scenic byway type thing. A lot of people are interested in byways. I think there's something like 9 of them in the state of Oregon that are identified as scenic byways. And we'd like to play on that program because that shows up on state maps, and it shows up on various other advertisements and so forth. So pretty much it's trying to get out into the various media and get it into brochures and maps and so forth.
Thank you.
Okay. Tom?
I got a couple of things in here. And, so Highway 30, now is it considered the Lincoln Highway, this one is?
I'm sorry?
Is it considered the Lincoln Highway? Now, I saw a thing on OPV, and I think it came from New York, and they were talking Highway 30 to San Francisco, but I grew up with Highway 30 here. So are we part of that same highway, or what? Were we there first, or they?
Yeah, I grew up in Chicago, and I remember the Lincoln Highway as being something that I recall out towards, from the Chicago area out towards Nebraska. How far it actually went and whether it was considered that all the way out or not, I'm sorry, I don't know. I've not heard it called Lincoln Highway out here. Anyone else here? I haven't heard it.
So Highway 30, they're talking about this thing going to San Francisco, and that's where they went all the way across the country.
Right.
So did it go to San Francisco first, or to the Oregon coast first? We don't know that?
I don't.
So my other question is when you're talking about bicyclists, is your stairway down there at Eagle Creek, can you make that into a viaduct so we can just ride, so we can ride the top of that thing instead of a stairwell?
That's in our long-range plan, and unfortunately, it's about a $2 million project, so until we can find funding, the stairway stays, so.
Maybe an elevator.
We do have some volunteers with an organization called Friends of the Historic Highway that are.
They'll carry your bike up the stairs.
Well, no, they're trying to find some money and see if they can talk some engineers into volunteering to do some design work on it, but we're still $2 million of construction, so.
We just had the event to Crown Point, to do the event, we bring in a football team there at Eagle Creek to back the bikes
Yeah,
up
there
where
we
we
go.
got the stairs.
Gail?
I'm not real sure, other than a letter, is this gonna affect signage on any of the city streets?
If it's acceptable to the city, it would be on Wanapa and Forest Lane, that's the historic highway through the city. So it would substitute, wherever there's a US 30 sign, it would be changed to a historic Route 30 sign.
Okay.
And it's only if the byways organization is interested in extending the byway, would be able to get the byway signs in.
Well, if that were to occur, if this, given the city responsible for maintaining city streets, does that create another bureaucracy we have to deal with to get approval for doing anything on our streets, or what?
Well, it's the historic highway, and you still have to deal with ODOT. The signage would also be by ODOT, and it would be, they would maintain the historic Route 30 sign as they substitute, take out the US 30 sign. So it would just be a switch out of that sign. If the city is interested in the byway, then we would have to make another application to the byway organization to encourage them to include the city and presumably Wyatt Bench Road as part of the scenic byway.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my first question when I was approached about this idea, is this going to create another hurdle for economic development or a downtown corridor? And the answer is it's just changing the signs. You still have the same designation,
Okay.
but you just have the brown signs, the white signs, right?
Brown signs, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And but it also, I mean, our tourism committee works with Travel Oregon, we're already partnering there, and it opens another door to identifying Cascade Locks as a historic place to visit, but it doesn't, my understanding is just changing the signs isn't gonna create another hurdle.
Okay.
Mark?
I was just curious on Shell Rock and Mitchell Point. I had heard that they wanted to put a tunnel or something up Mitchell Point.
Yes.
And is that true?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that is a $10 to $12 million project, and we don't have that kind of money either, so.
And then what about Shell Rock?
Shell Rock is, that's our next area. We're working from Starvation Creek west at the present time, and there's about $1.5 million that Western Federal Lands Highway Division has, and they've committed to doing some design work and construction. So we'll be able to get about a half mile from Starvation Creek trailhead, about a half mile west, maybe 3/4 of a mile with that money. And then we're looking for funding from that point all the way to Wyeth. And that's about a $20 million total. So again, what we're looking for first, though, is to get money to do the preliminary engineering, so we can get a really good handle on costs and the technical problems. And I'm hopeful that maybe in a few months we might get at least some of the money toward that, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. We don't have it at this point.
And thanks for your help.
Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna ask for a consensus from the council for Paul and I to write a letter of support for this change and to bring it back to the council for approval at a subsequent meeting. Okay, Jeff, do you?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we got it, unanimous
Thank you very much.
consensus.
Appreciate your
Hey,
time.
we appreciate all the work you're doing in opening up this section, and we're just looking forward to next summer and having you back here in Cascade Locks to celebrate the opening.
Well, I'm hoping everybody will come out next summer when we do celebrate, when we do have the grand opening and cut the ribbon. Thank you very
All right,
much.
thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. At this point, we will take a 8-minute break. Give a chance to change the tapes, and we'll come back for appearance of interested citizens. I'll move now to the remainder of our agenda, starting with appearance of interested citizens, share a variety of perspectives on issues facing our community. Just wanted to clarify, as I said at the beginning, we are asking people to limit their comments to under 5 minutes. You know, we do appreciate people participating, and we ask that you direct your comments to the council as a whole rather than individual people. Having said that, we'll bring first Dave Palais from Redding, California.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Dave Palais. I'm with Nestle Waters, North America. It's a pleasure to be back before you again. I wanted to comment on some issues that were raised during public comment at your last meeting. First, as you know, we've been working collaboratively with the city and with the port for the past 4 years, and we will continue to do so. We've always encouraged both the port and the city to ask the tough questions and perform your own due diligence and research on our company and regarding our proposed project here in Cascade Locks. We're very proud of our environmental stewardship and our community involvement around the country, so we welcome your thorough, unbiased review of our company. Transparency remains one of our core ethics, and I would encourage you to contact additional people in Michigan for a more accurate version of events there than were portrayed at your last meeting. Many of the things presented then are incorrect, and this can easily be verified with conversations with local governmental officials and the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. I believe the executive director of the port, Chuck Daughtry, has already been in contact with somebody from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and he can speak to some of the inaccuracies that were reported to you at your last meeting. Nestle Waters is committed to being a participating business member in your community should our project proceed, and the other communities in which we work and live. We're committed to sustainable operations at all of our facilities at which we operate. This means continuing our efforts at protecting water resources and watersheds, contributing to vibrant communities, and providing economic and employment opportunities to Cascade Locks and the surrounding region. I want to thank you for your support of our proposed project. I will be in my office on Wednesday, the office next to the post office, between 8:30 and 3:30. And I welcome anyone to stop by there if they have questions about the project or wish to discuss anything about the project. And again, I wish to thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Dave.
What were your hours, Dave, at Wednesday?
Wednesday I'll be there from 8:30 to 3:30. I'll also be back in 2 weeks. I haven't set that time, but we'll advertise that on the public access channel.
Okay. Okay. Next up, Tiffany.
I want to first start by saying that the budget process has some very strict guidelines about noticing the public as to when hearings will be. And this last budget process was not done legally. Oregon budget law states that it has to be notified 2 times, 5 to 30 days before the meeting, and the 2 publications must be separated by at least 5 days. That did not happen at this last budget hearing that was in the council, that the council voted on. Not only that, there were some things that happened. I understand the motive, the reason why they happened, but you had the hearing, you closed the hearing, you passed the budget, you voted on the resolution, to change from $45,000 to $57,000, and you didn't give the public time to comment on it, and then you passed the budget again. If the council sitting before this would have done that, there would have been screaming higher than the heavens could hold. If the council would have changed $12,000 of anything, there would have been screaming unheard of. Not only that, I want to go on to say that a year ago, sitting in one of those seats over there, I heard it over and over again by many sitting here and their family members, how the city was financially fine and the drastic actions taken by the budget committee and the council at that time were unnecessary and irresponsible. Fast forward to today and the recent actions taken by this council to fix the financial problems that don't exist. Also, I'd like to read a letter, part of a letter that is going to be mailed out by this council to the to Justin Shoemaker. It's in your council packet, and in this letter it states, quote, "The city of Cascade Locks has completed its 2012-2013 budget and faced some of the worst shortfalls it has considered in years," unquote. That's a statement by you as a council that you are making. Either you were lying a year ago or you're lying now.
Okay, Caitlin.
Resident of Cascade Locks. I will bypass the reason I am not present, as everyone in town already knows by, and I addressed it earlier. What I witnessed in the last council meeting when this council amended the budget without going through the amendment process as required by law just got the city in trouble. What the council was required to do was to republish your amended budget under the provisions for an amended budget, presented in the proper format under the timelines required, allowing the citizens an opportunity to inspect the amended budget, republish the notice of a new budget hearing, as well as other Oregon budget law violations. So it seems this council never read the budget rule book. Then, to witness this council making an estimate for the fire department, when Oregon budget law makes it clear that the estimates must be prepared by organizational unit or by program and in the proper documented format. So because this council never read the budget rule book, again, the city will pay. Followed by authorizing a fund adjustment of $12,000 when the Oregon budget law restricts this council to a single $5,000 limitation per fund appearance. Fund appropriation. Oops, you forgot about that as well. So once again, this council is exercising powers they do not hold, and once again, the city will be in trouble for it. Then try and cover up ad valorem taxes as interfund transfers in the budget, not waiting for the citizens to vote for these taxes, and failure to have these ad valorem taxes certified. All I can say is good luck with that. Then to end without publishing the notice for the budget hearing in accordance to Oregon budget law twice, before the budget or once, and on the city website in plain sight or under public notice link within the required timelines, I would say pretty much invalidates the entire budget process. As a matter of fact, in tearing up this budget inside out, I found so many Oregon budget law violations that would have been funny had it not been for what the effects of the complaints I filed with the Oregon Department of Revenue are going to do to the city. I guess it's too bad that the deadline to file for an extension has passed, but it's what it is. But this said, there comes a time in every citizen's life when government corruption can be tolerated for only so long, when one must balance the scales of justice back to the rule of law, which is the basis our great nation was founded on. So, can I ask this council why you are all doing all of this? Because it's apparent that you just either don't know the rules or don't care. And it's just bad for you that I do care. Because if you knew the rules, you would not be doing what you've been doing. And you wonder why the people do not trust and dislike you? But it's not me who has to live with myself for the actions. The council, Tom excluded, lies totally within you, the unelected. And on my start, I really love all these new agenda amendments over the weekend. Shows up, not even printed on the ones here on the seats for us. That's really not fair, clear, or transparent. We walk in, we're not playing, we don't know what we're talking to anymore. There's new things added on we don't even have anything for. Now, I'll excuse Paul for that because he's working up to the last minute to give you guys information. But there's no reason we couldn't have had an amended agenda sitting on those seats back there when we walked in at 7 o'clock tonight. Thank you. Next time, read the letter.
Thank you. Virginia, you're next.
Hi, my name is Virginia Fitzpatrick. I will address the council, but my first comment is to a specific person, and I don't need to name names. I'm here tonight to tell you that I do not appreciate you revising my comments or putting your spin on what I said, especially after I left the meeting. I went back and listened to the meeting of June 25th at the council comment time. There was used to respin, dispute, and correct what I said. If you think someone misspoke and have a burning desire to set the record straight, the time to say it is during that conversation, not after the person's left the room or the table. That being said, on June 25th meeting, I spoke on the possible cost-saving measures that Paul provided for the city council. I said there were only a couple measures that the council were even mildly interested. Go back and sit through that meeting tape and see for yourself. I'm right. There were actually 3 items. The one I expounded most on was number 6, the measure that reduces a full-time administrator. I think it is totally irresponsible to even consider that in light of the state of this town. I was a little bit more diplomatic the first time I commented. My comments and opinions are mine. I'm entitled to give you all feedback and state my opinions. I do not need anyone to clarify, correct, or restate what I said after I've left. So in the future, if you need to do so, I'd appreciate it if you would address me with your questions and concerns. The other 2 measures that any interest was expressed in or acted on was number 3 and number 8. Number 3 was employee health insurance. And yes, there was a minute cost savings there. I say minute because it sounds like a lot, but in actuality it's a very small percentage. I understood it to be that the employees would increase their contribution from 2.5% to 5%. And in the future, when costs go up, the employees will pay 50% of the increase. But really, with a COLA of 2.96 for this year, that is over half the 5% increase. It's really a minute amount. I have no problem with the city staff. Actually, they've always been very helpful and polite to me. If I had one of those jobs, I'd want to keep my benefits and want to raise too. That's natural. Who can fault that? But as a taxpayer, when I go to DMV and they are closed taking furlough days because of shortfalls in the budget, I wonder what our local leaders are thinking. Where's this money coming from? We have not had a big building boom. No businesses have come. The other measure was number 8, reduce city staff to minimal service level. Basically, all you guys did was say, let's look at it after work study and wage study is done. I don't call that action, especially after voting to hire 2 more employees. Is the money for that part-time recorder coming from the 2% enterprise increase? In my opinion, I do not think any of you, with the exception of Tom, have any sense of what the voters really want. Most of you are on public payrolls, your paychecks come from taxes, so I can see how you would naturally lean in that direction of just raising the prices. Now, Mr. Merritt, you missed it on this one. I do not believe there is one person in this town that does not support or does not want the fire department, like you said in one of your setting the record straight sessions. That was one of your comments. You brought it up, so let's take a moment to inform you of the situation, since apparently you do not really understand. There was no previous oversight in the fire department, at least not a fiscal oversight. And in light of that, the citizens are paying $450,000 loans for trucks, and whether you like it or not, 3 engines were blown up in a city-owned vehicle. So it is not the citizens that do not want a fire department. That's not it at all. As a public official, you need to get your facts straight. For you to make that statement is totally ridiculous. I do not know anyone, and I bet you could not find a single person in this town that does not want a fire department. The issue is bad or lack of management. There's a serious lack of trust in the city both ways. You as a council take a roundabout way of increasing revenue, almost sneaky. You have no faith that the voters would approve, and you're probably right, but last time I checked, this was America, a democracy, majority rules, and there's freedom of speech. And if you have any comments, questions, or need to set the record straight in the future regarding any remarks I make, you need to talk to me, just as I'm talking to you, not behind my back or after I've left. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce?
Yes, sir, thank you. My name is Bruce Fitzpatrick. I've been down here for about 20 years, maybe a little more. And my comment pertains to the letter I received in my utility bill. In the letter here, you mentioned 2 of the actions which you have taken on behalf of the citizens to fund the EMS department. Then your letter goes on to state how we need to increase the fees because the departments are going broke, our enterprise funds. But you don't mention Resolution 1235, where you took 2% more out of those enterprise funds that you now claim are going broke. And I thought that should have been in there. I mean, I think you should have informed your customers in this letter that you voted to take the 2% out of these departments to fund the EMS. This projected move strips another $42,750 out of those departments with your own projections. And I don't know about everybody else. I was kind of naive. I didn't realize you already took $108,000 out of those departments, I guess, for administrative costs. Maybe you take the payroll out into the general fund and then pay it. I don't know. You say that we'll have to pay more for your services, and I say ask the citizens who fund these services if they want their water, sewer, electric, and cable rates raised to pay for emergency services personnel. You say it's only for 2 years, but that was a resolution, right? And we now know about administrative and legislative. If you're right and your actions are truly the will of the majority of your constituents, then be honest about the cost to the people and let them vote on all the increases. If your increases are voted in, you were right, and there shouldn't be any complaints from the citizens. That's a democratic process. I think only in this method, if the citizens have a chance to express their opinions, will the city begin to heal the divide. If you want the citizens to trust you, do not omit important information like you did in your letter. It sounds like a lie by omission, and I know that wasn't your guys' intent, but that's what it looks like. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. And that'll do it for non-agenda item comments. We'll move now to our reports and presentations. And the first one is a discussion regarding attorney services. Paul, are you prepared to lead that discussion?
Mayor Rubin's here to discuss a renewal of the attorney's contract. We'll be coming to the end of the first year with them, so he wants to talk to you about the conditions of that contract and whether you want to proceed. So, Ruben?
Okay. Well, first of all, on behalf of Alex Sasakowski and me, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to serve your legal needs over this last year. The year is up. The contract is available to be renewed automatically for up to 2 additional terms by mutual written consent. So this would be just a simple first amendment to the contract, 1 page. We're not asking for any changes in the terms or the consideration. If you are, please bring those to us, and we're certainly listening.
Okay. So is there question, comment, or discussion? Tom?
Do you have what we paid for the attorney in the last? Because I know we had the monthly payments in there. Did you do something extra than Do you have the total?
I don't, but we can get that for you.
Okay.
But that, you want the total paid in
Just
the last year?
Yeah.
The way it's structured is it's $1,200 for the first 15 hours. And then after that, Alex's bill, bills out at $140 an hour, and I bill out at $105 per hour.
And we don't know how much we did beyond the 12.
It's varied,
Right.
yeah, month to month.
Yes, I just want to get a total on.
Further questions, comments, or discussion? Gail?
I'm assuming that there'll be something on the agenda at some future date to take action on this,
Right.
so we're not deciding anything.
No, you're not. If you'd like to proceed, I would suggest we come back at July 23rd meeting with a recommended action. And we can have all that information done at that time.
Well, I would suggest that we get it prior to that time.
Sure.
As long as it's for the back end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the last time we had a change in attorney services, what we did was, we opened up an RFQ process, so it's within the last 2-3 years, we've done that a couple times, and we've had proposals from various different firms. And this was the firm, the only local firm that put in a proposal, and it was also the hourly rate was the lowest of any firms that made proposals. So I think part of the question before us, whether we decide to take action on it or not, will be, are we interested in looking at those other proposals, or are we satisfied with our services here? And I think that, I'd at least like to have just a council consensus whether we want to bring back the contract, or open up the process of RFQ or RFP.
Correct, and because we're local is why we're able to offer a lower cost. We're frankly just closer. We can come down here in 15-20 minutes. We don't charge for that time to come down here for city council meetings.
15 minutes?
15 to 20.
15 minutes?
What kind of car do you?
What kind of police?
Electric.
They're not patrolling.
I did say 15 to 20.
Jeff?
Keep have them come back with a request to renew the contract.
Randy?
Yeah.
Likewise.
Gail?
I don't care.
See if we can let you get away with that, Mark.
Yeah, I agree with what they're saying, yeah.
Tom?
I'm good with the attorney, if that's what we're asking. I'm good with what we got.
Okay, so that's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a firm, but yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I'm
So-
hoping for fun.
okay. So we'll bring that back. We'll attempt to bring that back, get you your information in the
Okay,
packet, so,
thanks.
yeah. Okay? Any other discussion? Okay. Let's see here. Next report will be from Paul. You have a handout for us?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, it's my report's in green tonight. Has nothing to do with environment. Before I begin, I wanted to just clarify something that came up over the past couple of weeks. In your adopted emergency services ambulance rates, there is a differential between residents and non-residents. So residents pay about $200 a month, or an incident less than non-residents do.
Okay.
So, and when I get to the end of my report, I want to cover the Emergency Services Department report. It's Devin's first one. We want to make sure we got everything in there that you want, and I do have for you copies of the arborist report on the cherry trees. But going through my report, first item is the Nestle project. You've heard from Dave tonight on the status of that. There is the potential of a July 25th Nestle-funded fact-finding trip. In order for the city to have participation in that and have that cost covered by the company itself, you would have to designate that as an officially sanctioned fact-finding trip. I'm recommending that you pass a motion declaring that and authorize up to 3 council members to attend that trip. It's on July 25th. It's what day? 1 day down and back?
Yeah, it'll be down and back in the same day, the early departure, returning mid to late afternoon.
And Port Commission has already taken similar action, so that's the same thing that they have done.
Okay, so before we move on to the rest of your report, we'd like to take this
Right.
action. So what we need is a motion and a second.
Can you take an action? You've already gone out of action items.
Right, but for this report, he's asking us to take an action, yeah. So, what we need is a council motion, and Paul, could you just speak to that question that was yelled out from the audience?
Right. Yeah, and Ruben and I talked about this beforehand. It's not unusual for the city council to take some formal action outside of action items. This report sometimes has business items in it that you give me direction on. And unless I misinterpreted what you said, Ruben, I think they're okay making this declaration.
Correct. What this is merely the entire council getting a consensus of council that this is in fact a fact-finding trip, and that the officials that are going on the trip are representing the government. And so really just it needs to be that oral declaration in the minutes that it is a fact-finding trip.
And when does the community get?
So what you're asking is oral declaration.
Yes.
Okay.
So
So we're not talking about a motion and a second and a vote.
Correct. We're just talking about a consensus.
Okay.
And when does the community get to comment on it?
So what we're gonna do is ask for a consensus from the council to declare this a fact-finding trip. Before we ask for that, I'm gonna suggest that the 3 members of the joint economic development subcommittee with Port be the 3 authorized to go on this. And that will be part of the consensus, and that's Randy, Mark, and myself. Jeff?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Randy?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Brad?
Yep, it's good.
Dale? Mark? Tom?
I'm good, but I would, when we do the chocolate milk factory one, I want to go.
I was Tom on that, chocolate milk, yeah.
Chocolate milk, okay. Is that in Tillamook?
I don't care where.
You don't care? It's in Wisconsin? Okay. So I guess, Ruben, does that satisfy your public declaration requirement?
Yes.
Okay, this be a fact-finding mission, okay. All right, Paul, please continue.
So I will need to have full names, including middle names and date of birth of the folks who are going, so you can file that with Kathy.
Okay, will do.
Bark and Food and Water Watch have filed affidavits with the state of Oregon seeking cancellation of the 5.7 CFS. And that's of the total 10 CFS existing Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife water rights. This could challenge the ongoing operation of the fish hatchery. We understand that this will go to one of 3 administrative law judges, and there's no time period for that to occur. Additionally, Bark and Food and Water Watch have challenged the point of diversion transfers. Those were the transfers that were done to correct a historic error. The state will be meeting with them, and we don't know when that meeting will happen, but those are just additional difficulties that we're going to face in this whole process. And then I've attached a copy of a news article that was sent to me regarding the recent protest rally in Portland dealing with the potential Nestle location in Cascade Locks. And I'll keep sending this information to you as a part of keeping you informed as to what's going on and what's happening around us. I talked to ODOT on Friday, and the repair of the Lakeside Street flooding will occur sometime in August or September. So I know, Tom, you're very concerned about that, so
Sounds good.
as soon as I hear from them, I'll let you know. Your Downtown Revitalization Steering Committee on June 28th elected their officers. Tom Owens is the new chair of the group. Sandy Place is the vice chair. They also adopted their job description and work plan, and I've attached it to my report for your information. Dealing with the RFQs for water and sewer master plans, the deadline for those RFQs is July 13th at 5 p.m. We've had about 30 inquiries, and about a dozen of those firms come to town to take a look at both water and sewer systems. I did Friday receive a letter from the state of Oregon extending the due date for an update of the water master plan to January of 2013. If you'll remember, a couple of weeks ago, I told you that we got a letter from the state indicating that we did not meet the due date for the master plan update, which was March 10th of 2010. So now they've extended that to January 2013. I put on your tables a flyer announcing the electric lineman rodeo. Bill was real excited that you should go to the rodeo and see what a lineman does. And I told him we would give you the information, and then he could take attendance at the event. On tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, we're having a meeting with the port and the architect firm that did the original assessment of the condition of the old fire station. I think, as everyone is aware, the port is taking a serious look at coming up with an offer to purchase that building from the city. I listed all of the meetings that I'm aware of for your information, and please pay attention to July 26th. For those of you who are on the Economic Development Subcommittee, we'll have to find a different location for the joint work group on economic development, because the Planning Commission is having a hearing on the fish market here on that same night. So that's all I had in terms of my report. Any questions? Let's go on to the monthly Emergency Service Department report. Interim Chief Wells sent a number of documents for your information in response to your request. The monthly report that's attached provides a listing of each volunteer and the number of percentage of their time involved in events. It gives you a breakdown of the location of the events, and you'll see 8 of the incidents were in Cascade Locks. 1 was at Bonneville Dam, 2 in Dotson, Warrendale, 1 City of Hood River, 3 at Trail Rescue at Hood River County, 3 Trail Rescue at Multnomah County, and 1 in Skamania County. He also breaks down for you the major incidents by type, so you can see how many incidents there were, and during the month he's reporting on, were 19 events, and then he breaks those out in terms of type of incident on the last page. Is this the kind of data you're looking for, and does it answer your questions? Yes.
This is a good operational overview, but it doesn't include everything that we talked about. Because one thing that we asked that he said he would do is provide us a list of dates of ambulance calls and when the bills were submitted.
Okay.
possible that all of these calls were billed, but it doesn't, I mean, that should at least be included in the summary. You know, if you're providing us with all these calls, and say each one of these calls, then the bill is already sent.
Non-billable or something.
It's either unbillable or it's been sent to Springfield, for them to conduct the billing.
Well, yeah, what we asked for and what he said he could do is give us the date of the call and the date the bill was submitted. Not a one-liner saying they've been billed.
Right.
Should be by event.
Will do. Any other suggestions? Okay. So the.
Well, I would just like to say that that's information, rather than waiting until, you know, a month from now, the beginning of August, council meeting, I would like to have that information, sometime this week, unless it's not possible to get it to us in that time frame. But it is what we asked for, and it's what he said he could do.
I'll check and see. The last item to review with you is the report from David Braun, who is the arborist that we had look at the cherry trees. So you'll notice in his report, he indicates that there are 28 trees. His recommendations include annual light pruning over the next few years, in the spring before the leaf out to help restore the crowns. 2 of the trees, numbers 23 and 28, should be replaced, and additional cherry trees should be planted in 2 or 3 spots where he identified locations where they had been removed. So you may want to take a look at this at your own leisure, and if you have any questions, let me know. Yes.
So that was one of the issues of this is we're gonna talk about doing this. How are we gonna pay for this? Whose budget is this coming out of? Because we just did a budget, and I don't think the budget shows anything that has to do with caring for the cherry trees. So is this tourism? Is this public works? Where are we gonna get the money for this?
Seeing as how we just got the report, I'll have to sit down
Okay, so
with the department heads.
we're gonna figure that out and say,
Yes.
okay, good.
Yes.
Other questions or comments?
Thank you for the report, Paul.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'll move now to mayor and city council member comments. Start with you, Jeff.
Yeah, I just want to talk about briefly 416, and that's what the voters wanted. The voters want to vote on it. That's what we have that for. It is a 2-year, with the rate increases is for 2 years. That's under resolution, and that will expire with that. That's what that's about. That's getting the information out there, being open, honest, and upfront with what's going on. We listened, we came through with this, and we're going to keep going with this, and the citizens will decide if they support the fire department, and this is how they want to fund it. And this is where we're going to go. So, enough said of that. And I want to thank the fire volunteers. I watched them put out the fire at the lumber mill, or the mill, that was actually at the, forklift that got wires crossed and some fuel got going. And actually, I think, Mark, you're the actual one that saw it and called 911, is that correct?
Yeah, propane fire.
Yeah, the propane fire out there with one of their forklifts. So they were working that night. They had 2 trucks out there, brought another truck in from Skamania, and I think one from North Bonneville.
North Bonneville,
Yeah, they had, it was a good response and saved one of the buildings and the other equipment that was there. So good job for the volunteers, and thank you.
Nothing?
Okay. Brad?
Nothing.
Dale?
No.
Mark?
I'd like to clarify that I work for a private company, so I don't work with the public.
Tom?
Yeah, my issue on all those things is, I don't think it's a matter of supporting it's the issue of you either you support the fire department, if you give money, but you don't support them, if you're not gonna give them money. I don't think that's the issue. I think the whole issue has always been about, the whole issue has been about how money's managed, and that's the issue. And you give them as much money as you want. If you don't manage it right, if you don't spend it properly, it's all going down the hole. That's my issue. I have no problem giving money. My problem is how it's managed. But, along with what, we have Stillwater Days. Stillwater Days, looked like there's gonna be a washout, but things, it's funny how things go around here with the sunshine. As soon as the sunshine comes out, people roll out. And Stillwater Days started out kind of shaky in the morning, and then it straightened up. And then as soon as it straightened up, everybody came rolling into the park. So it was a good event. I enjoyed the, I went to go very many parades. I got to be in the last couple of parades, and all the kids in town show up there. So it's because they do a good job spreading candy. Whatever it is, we get a good turnout for it. We get a good turnout with the kids, and I'm glad. It's nice to see the kids out there and being part of that. You know, getting to see the parade, being part of that thing. But Stillwater Days, I thought went well. It got out slow, but weather changed and did well. They were talking about the scenic highway and the potential for biking in there. I mean, we're seeing more and more biking down in the park all the time. When people are using the little bike trails they got out on the port property, and of course they're working the scenic highway. And they just had a big event last year. This was the second event that they had, the Crown Point Run. That initiates at Cascade Locks, ends in Cascade Locks. And I think we had less than 100 last year, right around 100 signed up for it. This year there was like 300 signed, now 300 signed up for it. So that event's growing. It's becoming popular, and it's going, and it brought lots of folks into town again on bicycles. And I think that is, again, part of our growth area is the bicycle community. So it's nice to see that growing, and again, lots of good volunteers. Anything you got to do is going to require volunteers, and you had some good volunteers on the thing that helped out. And you know, with that, I appreciate what. A big drive behind that's been Jesse Groves. I appreciate what he's put a lot of effort, put a lot into this thing, and it looks like it's growing, and hopefully it takes roots and goes for us. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Okay. So it was brought up earlier. I think I'll just mention that our council rules identify the agenda, and as part of those rules. And that just the past practice as well has been that when we have an item for citizens to share their perspective on non-agenda items, that the council doesn't engage in a dialogue. And so it's not, it wouldn't be correct to expect a back and forth dialogue during that item. But we also have a time later, after we've heard those comments, for the council to respond if they choose to, just like Mark did, just like Tom has done, about comments. So that just, hopefully that clarifies. If other people have questions, I'd be happy to meet with you and explain the specifics on that. It was also, again, brought up about management, particularly about our fire department. And Tom mentioned earlier, you know, that when he talks about management, he's talking about the city council management, the city council's administration, and perhaps that's what people are talking about when they say there's poor management. But I think it's important to recognize that our council has identified probably one of the regional experts on managing a fire department. And brought him in as an interim fire chief and listened to his recommendations. And so to say that we have a problem with the management of the fire department now, in some ways it boggles the mind to try to think, well, what better management would people want than for us to bring in at least the regional, if not what, you know, even broader expert to help us rebuild the fire department. Because the truth is, we've seen what happens when the council trusts their own gut instinct and doesn't listen to the experts. And that happened about a year ago when our fire department collapsed. And so, you know, I want to just state for the record that we have done a good job of managing by finding an expert and finding people that know what they're talking about in terms of managing fire departments. And we've listened to them, and we've taken action according to their recommendations. It was also brought up about a couple people brought up issues about irregularities in the budget process. And Paul, I'd like to ask for at least a consensus from the council to have you investigate those and see if there's any merit to those claims that budget law was violated, and if there's any remedies that we can take if there were violations. Please present those back to us. So is there a council consensus for Paul to look into that? Jeff?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Brad? Gail?
Agreed.
Okay. Let's see. Also, at our last meeting, we had a visitor from Michigan, and the representative from Nestle was here, Dave, to talk about perhaps some some corrections to the perspective that was shared. I had actually already started doing that. I've got a phone call into the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality to try to figure out what their perspective is. But here's the important point to me that I think is important that people understand. At the plant that was talked about in Michigan, this was a case where Nestle had purchased a water source from a private party and owned their spring. And so because they owned that they had a water right to that spring, they were able to pump whatever they wanted out of their own spring. That's what their water right told them they could do. And we haven't really been looking at investigating that particular case because that's not what's being talked about here in our opportunity to work with Nestle. Rather, the city would own the spring, and the city would then, or at least the water rights to the spring, and the city would control how much gets pumped. So it's a totally different scenario. Now, the irony of it to me is that if the opportunity to site in Cascade locks is thwarted by these outside interest groups that are just against Nestle, what's going to happen is Nestle is going to go buy a private spring. They've already told us that. And so in trying to prevent something like what happened in Michigan from happening, what they're actually doing, what they could potentially be doing, is creating that same scenario where a corporation purchases a spring and owns it, and they can pump whatever they want. So I still believe it's worth looking into some of the things that Mrs. Schweier suggested to us a couple weeks ago, because she did have some good points. It's not that we should just throw out her recommendations, but I do think it's important for us to recognize there's a difference in what she went through, where it was an environmental activist group sued the State Department of Environmental Quality to try to stop a company from pumping water that they owned. So that's not what's being proposed here at all. So I want to make that clear, because as far as I've delved into this, that is a very clear difference. And I'm going to continue to look into it and see what actually happened in Michigan, because it's been suggested that this environmental activist group won a court case, but when you look for the outcome of that court case, so far I haven't been able to find it. So I'm still looking, but hopefully my conversations with the folks at Michigan DEQ are going to maybe lead me in that direction. But so right now there are some questions about what's actually there. Some people know I take my daughter on the hike on the historic highway from Bridge of the Gods to Eagle Creek and back on the weekends. And so the other weekend we took that hike, and then I've been noticing more and more bikers, but I was just amazed, all the one after the other, all going in the same direction, and then they had these little numbered tags on the back. And finally one of them stopped for a break at Ruckle Falls, and we got a chance to talk, and 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 they were talking about the great event that was being put on. You know, got a chance to hear from people who are just amazed at the scenic beauty that's here. And again, you know, we've almost doubled that event from last year, and next year when it's when we've got that Troutdale to Cascade Locks open, there's gonna be even more publicity. And if Tom and I can get our elevator installed next to those stairs, then we can get rid of that football team and just continue. But it's but yeah, a couple of people that stopped to talk did mention that those stairs is a surprise when you get to halfway there or whatever. So, but that was a good event, and I want to thank the board for helping to put that on, as well as our partners in tourism and the event planners. So. I mentioned earlier I had the chance to take an ODOT-sponsored tour of the historic highway, and heard about some of the things that they have planned. I mean, it's great what they've been able to piece together with different funding sources for connecting Troutdale to Cascade Locks, and we know that's going to make it a statewide attraction. You know, people are going to come here to bike that section of trail. But the plan for 2015, which would be the 100-year anniversary of the historic highway, is to connect Troutdale to Mosier, which is, when that happens, we're going to have a world-class attraction. And fortunately, we're at the beginning stages of planning to make Cascade Locks kind of a hub for people to come to access either direction, whether it's trails for biking, hiking. There's been discussion about identifying water trails for kayakers, paddle boarders, and not to mention the World Championship sailing events that are coming next summer. So I got a chance to talk to people from as far away as Metro, elected officials, and as well as ODOT people. And it was great for them to see what's, the exciting things that are happening in Cascade Locks. And as usual, I continue to hear from outside governmental agency groups and other people that are just kind of watching about the fantastic things that they've been seeing last 6 months in Cascade Locks. And we appreciate the hard work that our staff is doing to make those happen. And it's being noticed, and we're becoming more and more of an attraction. I also do want to just commend the council for actually giving the citizens a chance to vote on the fee increases. It's important that we highlight that because there is a legislative process to do that, and people who want to vote to support the fire department can. People who don't support it will probably continue to be opposed to it. So. But it's pretty clear that the community does want fire department and emergency services department. So we'll see. Last thing, I did get a chance to watch the fireworks display on the 4th of July here, and had some visitors from out of town. And they did kind of a Pepsi challenge between Stevenson's display and our Cascade Locks display, and it was unanimous that we had the best display, at least in this part of the gorge. And it's great that people can come here and see both, though. I mean, that's an added attraction. But I just wanted to take a minute to thank the port and the volunteer firefighters. It's great that we've got that partnership with the port to put this event on, and that we have the skilled personnel there to put on just a fantastic display. And happy birthday, America. So that's it for me. We'll move on now to other matters. Anyone have any other matters? Okay. We do not have an executive session scheduled, and the last item on our agenda is adjournment. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, Jeff's made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Discussion. Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Adjourn.
I know you probably don't look at the YouTube video because yours.